Ever since I was little, I always remembered seeing pumpkin pie on the table during our Thanksgiving dinners. I assumed that my grandmother had made it as she has a special talent for cooking. However, when interviewing her for this project, she revealed to me that all this time it had been a store-bought pie. As I expressed my surprise, she wisely answered, "Why reinvent the wheel?" Native to North America, the Pilgrims encountered pumpkins for the first time when they arrived in the New World, and it quickly became a staple in their diet. These plump golden gourds were used in puddings, ales, and stews, in addition to its traditional pie form. It was celebrated across the colonies. This poem from 1850, found in the Massachusetts Plowman and New England Journal of Agriculture, exemplifies its cultural significance. "But here beneath bright freedom's sky, a land that valor won, we'll sing our famous pumpkin pie from morn till setting sun." Before the turn of the 19th century, people would make pumpkin pie by stewing the fruit all day. However, as industrialization progressed and people had less time to cook, they started using canned pumpkin instead. Soon pumpkin pies were being seasonally produced in pie factories instead of in the home. By the 1960s, frozen pies were being sold in supermarkets. So when I think of my grandma buying our pumpkin pies from the grocery store, I realize we are participating in a modern ritual. The ritual of mass consumption. Consumer culture is not inherently wrong, as the invention of the pre-canned pumpkin was more sanitary than home-canned, and it was more time-efficient for families. However, this culture becomes toxic when we don't honor the people that made it possible for us to buy said pies from the comfort of our local supermarkets. And so I arrived at my question. Who are the individuals responsible for harvesting the pumpkins that millions of families consume all across the country each Thanksgiving? And how do we show thankfulness for them? I decided to start with my grandmother and trace it back from there. She told me that she buys Mrs. Smith's original flaky crust pumpkin pies. After a little investigating, I concluded that the canned pumpkins used in the recipe most likely came from Libby's, the world's largest pumpkin factory located in Morton, Illinois. It's estimated that approximately 8 of every 10 cans of pumpkin sold across the world are Libby's 100% pure pumpkin. Libby's harvests Dickinson pumpkins, which are a different species from the traditional orange-field pumpkin we are familiar with. Dickinsons are a pale oblong squash and belong to the Cucurbita moschata species. It is preferred because of its sweet taste. Field pumpkins are a decorative gourd and a subspecies of the Cucurbita pepo. It is edible but unappetizing. Colonial Americans ate them if they couldn't afford anything else, but they were typically used as cheap animal feed. These Dickinson pumpkins are the livelihood of Morton. Many of the small town's community members are employed by Nestle, the owner of Libby's, as truckers, mechanics, and office workers, to name a few. Every fall, the town holds a pumpkin-themed festival which draws an approximated 70,000 visitors annually. The plant covers 5,000 acres of fertile farmland dedicated to producing pumpkins. Located there are sanitation and canning plants, where 210 seasonal employees turn the pumpkin into a product ready to be exported to stores. These seasonal employees come to Morton in July on H-2A and H-2B visas, which permit seasonal jobs in food processing and agriculture. Many of these workers are migrants from Mexico. Despite playing a crucial role in this community, they often find themselves othered by the residents of Morton. In an interview with WCBU, Morton's Director of Tourism, Susan Piles, says there isn't much interaction between the community and seasonal workers because they're out in the field or inside the canning plant. Workers concur that the laborious work does take a toll on them. Jesus Garnzoy is a Mexican immigrant who splits his year between Texas and Illinois, where he works for the Seneca Foods Corp. Based in Princeville. It is a company that contracts for Libby's.
So how many hours are you in the field?
Sometimes 12 hours, sometimes 16 hours. Sometimes I get exhausted, but I'm used to it already. I've worked 10 years here already.
Garnzoy's worker visa allows him to bring his family along to Illinois, where his niece, Jasmine, goes to Princeville High School. She too experiences discrimination from the Norton community.
Pretty much like in school, there's like few Mexicans. I feel weird because like people stare a lot, like, okay, we're normal people. Yeah, it's kind of like, I guess, difficult for me.
In addition to the interpersonal racism they endure, these workers and their families face losing certain privileges afforded to them by the H-2A and H-2B visas. According to a 2020 paper published by the Congressional Research Service, a public policy research institute that works exclusively for the United States Congress, many policymakers assert that the H-2A and H-2B visa programs are not adequately protecting foreign workers. The Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952 allows for the spouses and minor children of foreign workers on said visas to enter the United States to accompany the worker, enabling families to stay together. However, this practice has been faulted for decreasing incentives for guest workers to return home after their authorized period of stay. Some legislative proposals to establish new guest worker programs would have explicitly prohibited family members from accompanying or following to join principal aliens. This would mean that children like Jasmine would have to say goodbye to the breadwinner of their family for half the year. Now, I think it's fair to say that we are not showing thanks to these essential workers when we try to split their families apart due to xenophobia. So, what would happen if workers stopped coming to American farms because they were unwelcomed? A world without migrant workers would have serious environmental consequences. John Ackerman, a contractor for Libby's, has personally witnessed the impact when migrant workers are pushed out.
I have seen the horror stories of farms in Georgia and Alabama and Arkansas where the migrant workers got scared and they took off, and there was nobody to harvest those crops. There's produce that rotted out in the field, and there's pictures and documentation of that.
We all have a duty to protect the individuals responsible for producing the food found on our plates. Forgetting this duty enables them to disappear behind the scenes, where greedy employers and racist policymakers can exploit them. What this duty looks like varies from person to person. You may decide to advocate for safeguarding policies, or to bring back the tradition of making your own pumpkin pies from scratch so you can boycott the companies that don't adequately protect their workers. We can all taste the migrant workers' sweet labor in the pumpkin pies served to us on silver platters. Let's start a ritual of honoring their undeniable presence at our Thanksgiving feasts, and then allowing that thankfulness to translate from the table to the real world.